Quazi here. If you reduce everything in the universe to its fundamental form, you're going to find that they're made of these things called atoms. The Greek word it originates from is atemnein, which literally means not to cut. These atoms, however, are never static. They're always in constant motion. The dynamic motion of atoms is called vibration. Now, from the teachings of Hermes in the Emerald Tablet written many thousands of years before the birth of Christ, we could see that there was mention of one of the most fundamental principles through which our world operates. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. This is taken directly from the Kybalion, which is thought to be the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice greatest. If we look at the human mind, we're very, very bad at thinking dynamically, but very, very good at thinking statically. For example, think about a car moving along the highway. Now think about a car standing still on the highway. I bet when you were thinking about a car moving along the highway, you could only picture a car standing still, right? Our intellect works in black or white. There's very little room for a gray area. Our minds are actually made for a dual world. This is why it's so difficult for us to understand motion and dynamics. Only when we can take a snapshot of dynamic motion and turn it static can we begin to understand the motion of moving bodies. Now, since the Renaissance in the 1500s with the progression of science and mathematics, we've become more and more static thinkers rather than dynamic thinkers. Along with this progression, we've lost some knowledge that once we used to possess, the secret knowledge of vibration, of energy, and of frequency. Nikola Tesla said it best when he said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Mankind has progressed very, very far. There's no doubt about it. But with the advent of all of this external technology, AI, social media, electronics, the focus has really been on the outer world, isn't it? Now is the time for us to grow in consciousness. And in order to do that, we must understand the powers that were once held by the ancients. In this video, I'm going to share with you how you can become a conscious creator of your destiny by yielding the power once held by the ancients, the powers of vibration, energy, and frequency. I'm super excited to get started, so let's jump right in. So my first entry into the world of vibration, frequency, and energy came when I learned about consciousness and how to raise our levels of consciousness. So recently, I've been very interested in this topic because I was listening to a podcast with Joe Rogan, Graham Hancock, and this geologist called Randall Carlson. And in it, they were talking about how it's still not properly explained how the Egyptians were able to make the pyramids. And some of these stone blocks that were used to make the pyramids right now, they weighed around 80 tons. And just to give you an example of that, that's around 2 Boeing 757 airplanes. And they did that with what? I don't believe they used pulley systems back then. There was no evidence of that. That was during the Roman era. So the theory that they're positing right now is that the Egyptians had access to a technology that is not available to us. Okay, and this has to do with the plasmoid unification model that they talked about on that podcast. And that has largely to do with geometries, understanding resonant frequencies, because if you can understand the resonant frequency of an object, you can destroy it, you can make it do things, right? It's the cheat code to manipulating that object. Everything around us right now, all sound, okay? Everything it's composed of sound. Everything has its own vibration. Even the pyramids have their own vibration. They've reported different vibrations as they've gone near it. Scientists have used different machines to see different vibrations and how there's like a low-pitched hum that all these pyramids have. The next instance, I remember reading this book by Sadhguru. I believe it was his biography written by this woman. It's called More Than a Life. When I was reading it, Sadhguru his main mission throughout the first 20, 30 years of his life was consecrating the Dhyana Linga. And this is this stone structure that he consecrated. He consecrated the energies of different chakras in it, and it's located in India. Now, what he did after the consecration was he did a clap of his hands, and with a clap of his hands, he made a crack on that stone structure. So this kind of led me into this journey of understanding vibrations and sounds and resonant frequencies, because that's what he said when asked. He was like, oh, this is just an understanding of vibration and sound. So when you get to a heightened state of energy within yourself, certain yogis, certain enlightened masters, they're able to do this. I'm not able to do this. I don't understand how it works, so that's why I study it deeply, because I'm very, very interested in it, and as I'm sure you are. The other instance in which I thought it was quite powerful was understanding how not just objects and material objects work in relationship to sound, but our own consciousness, our own thoughts, our own feelings, they vibrate at a certain frequency, okay? There are scientists who have done studies, I believe there was this Japanese scientist, on the molecules of water. If you think happy thoughts and you direct it towards water, let's say you get a glass of water and you put your hands around it and you feel joyous, you feel happy. The molecules, when they microscopically analyze the molecules of that water, it changes into a more harmonious, in a more structured and ordered fashion. As opposed to when people were thinking bad thoughts, angry thoughts, negative thoughts, then the molecules got scattered into more and more chaos. This is quite interesting. I'm sure you can look it up. The final instance that tipped me over the edge was this Dr. Jarl. He said he visited some Tibetan monks and they were lifting up structures in a very small orifice in a cave. And it was like 10, 20 feet. Kind of like the Egyptians did, through chanting, through vibrations. So after really studying all of this, I don't really understand how sound, vibration, and all of that works, but what I can tell you is in my personal life, what's made the biggest difference is when I change my state of consciousness. And this is something that I, again, learned from this book called Power versus Force by David R. Hawkins. In it, he has this scale of consciousness. So I'm going to pull it up right here. And if you look at it, if you look at this diagram right now, there's different levels, different energetic frequencies, which correspond to a different emotion or a different feeling. If you look at the lowest level, at shame, the energetic frequency is set to be 20. Now this 20 is on a logarithmic scale, meaning from 20 to 21 is a 10x increase in energy. Now I don't understand, well, I don't fully know what energetic metric they were using to do this. I urge you to read the book if you want to get deeper into that. So the lowest level is shame. A level above that is guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire. And the neutral level, which, kind of gets us into more and more higher vibration, is the level of courage, the level of 200. Below 200, you are said to be in a forceful mode. Okay, I want you to take a moment to reflect on this. Below 200, when you're below courage, you're living in pride, you're living in anger, you're living in desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, and shame. You are functioning in a forceful state. You are trying to manipulate, you're trying to take. Above that, you are said to be in a level of power, meaning you are more focused on giving, you're more focused on benefiting, you're more focused on helping. Your energy is more out there rather than sucking. Do you see the difference? David R. Hawkins does an excellent job in describing all of this in detail, so I urge you to read that book, Power versus Force, if you want to get more detail on this. But essentially, in our lives, when we live in a forceful state, we never really get what we want. Or when we do get what we want, there's always a price to be paid, okay? So a lot of people who are in this grind hard mentality, they're in this revenge mode, something bad has happened to them, they're living in that perpetual angry state. Anger at the level of 150. Your associated emotional state is hate. They're operating from a place of hate. Oh, I'll show the world, I'll work hard and I'll grind and I'll show them that I can do it. And their view of life, which is interesting to see, is antagonistic, right? A level above that, the view of life is demanding. When you're living in pride, you buy a first class ticket and you're put in business class, then you're more demanding. You're talking about the specifics. Hey, I paid for this. I should be getting this. Your pride is functioning. So I want you to look at this scale right now and look at the view of life, which will allow you to determine perhaps the level that you're functioning in, which closely resembles the level that you feel like you're functioning at, What is your view of life? This can be easily determined. Do you view life as harmonious, hopeful, satisfactory, complete, benign, meaningful, perfect? Or do you view life as feasible, demanding, antagonistic, or evil, or miserable? What's your view of life? Okay? If you just understand that, and again, this changes moment to moment. Our state of consciousness is very dynamic, just like vibration. It's not static. We're not always going to be at a particular level, but the average of the states that we feel from day to day, month to month, year to year, largely determines our state of consciousness or the vibration that we're at right now. An interesting thing to note, however, is when we get to higher and higher levels of consciousness, what happens is it becomes indistinguishable from the lower states of consciousness. I always say this, if you look at something that's moving quite rapidly, like the spokes of a car tire, or you look at a fan, when the fan blades are moving and rotating very fast, it almost seems like it's still, right? You can't see the movement. You can only see the movement when it's going at a certain frequency. So we're only able to notice certain frequencies, whereas other frequencies are kind of like a bell curve. So if I were to draw it out, this is what it would seem like. On the y-axis, if we have our amplitude or the disturbance that we make in nature, let's call it D for disturbance, and on the x-axis we have the state of consciousness or frequency. It would look like a bell curve. At the level of anger, courage, we make the most disturbance. We make the most noise. We slap our hands about on the water. So this would probably be anger, and this would probably be enlightenment, and this would be apathy or shame. There's a great quote the Buddha has. Before enlightenment, fetch water, chop wood. After enlightenment, fetch water, chop wood. It's in between that we slap our hands about on the water, right? This is before enlightenment, this is after enlightenment. So it's very interesting to see what happens at different levels of consciousness where it becomes indistinguishable. You'll see enlightened masters being more quiet, more calm, more peaceful. They're not making a lot of noise, they're not jumping around. The same thing you'll see if you're in apathy. You're not making a lot of noise, you're just sitting there, you're quiet, you're internally kind of depressed. So the only person who really knows is the experiencer of all of it, right? So this was very, very critical to my understanding, because what I started to notice was when I was functioning at different levels, life seemed harder at more forceful levels, below neutrality. When I was angry about something, when I was holding on to something, when I was focusing on things that I didn't want, versus when I was at higher levels, I was more in a loving, joyous, giving kind of mindset. So for example, when I make these videos, I'm always focusing on, hey, what can I give today? How can I help someone today? What can I share that could potentially help someone? And I try my best to give and come from a giving energy rather than taking. Like, hey, what can I take? How many views can I get? How much money can I make from this video? Because I know that if I focus on giving, that the receiving will happen. Because when you focus on giving, when you're in power, then you open yourself up to receiving. When you're focused on taking and receiving, you immediately become closed off. If I'm closed, I can't get anything, right? That's how it is. In different levels of my life, I've realized that if I started to become more and more giving, I would immediately open myself up. And so the question became, how can I transcend these levels of consciousness? How can I move on up every single day? How can I get lighter and lighter and emptier? So this is something that by the end of this video, I'm going to share with you this method called the letting go method, which is one of the most powerful things that I've done. I've helped over 1,000 clients with this, and every single one of them say, hey, learning how to coordinate, learning how to let go and learning how to deal with my feelings has been the most profound thing that I've ever done in my life. And I think, I believe it was Blaise Pascal, this French scientist or mathematician, he says mankind's biggest problem is that no one can go into a room and sit quietly for 30 minutes. We can't be alone with our thoughts. We're constantly looking for stimulation. And in a world full of information, within your fingertips, you have access to more information now than kings did, back in the day. You have access to more commodities than the highest monarch did, right? And because of all of this overload, The one who's going to succeed in this world full of chaos and information overload is the one who's focused, the one who's calmer, the one who can be that cool cucumber. So the question becomes, how can we move on up these levels of consciousness? Now, before I get to that, I want you to understand something very, very important. This world that we're living in right now, it's dual. Okay, there is black, white, male, female, hot, cold. It's very dual. Now, within this dual world, whenever we become judgmental, we close ourselves off. Whenever we identify with one positionality and we say the other one is wrong, we become closed off. And again, remember what we talked about. When we become closed off, we cannot receive. In order to change your state of consciousness, you have to stay in a state of openness. Know when to open and when to close. Have that balance between open and closing. The answer is always in the middle. It's never black or white, it's gray. Okay? So I want to share with you 3 keys that'll allow you to function in this world of duality, but also raise your state of consciousness. And when you raise your state of consciousness, goals that you've once had, they get accomplished by themselves, literally. Like, you don't have to insist on them, you don't have to persist, you don't have to push yourself against some invisible force, because all of these feelings, these subjective experiences that we're having of pushing, grinding, forcing, that's force, that's not power. When we start to function at higher states of consciousness, that should be your number 1 priority. When your number 1 priority becomes me and my state of consciousness, everything else gets taken care of itself. Okay? In life, there are 3 paradigms of functioning. The having paradigm, when people are focused on what can I have? What can I take? You become closed off, you become forceful. Then a level above that is what can I do in order to take? And finally, when you get to the highest level of all, it's who can I be? Who am I being at this very moment? When the being is focused on, everything else is like a domino. The doing is a consequence of being, and the having is a consequence of both doing and being, right? So the being is what we should focus on. That should be the number 1 priority. In my journey, when I've focused on becoming this ideal self, when I focused on it, instead of asking, what can I do to have a successful YouTube channel or make that impact or leave my 9 to 5, I thought about who must I become in order to live the life that I want to live? Who must I become in order to, have that financial freedom and have that, security that I was looking for and be able to walk away from my corporate job? Who must this person be to grow a 7-figure business? And when I focused on all of those things happened. So let's get to these 3 keys. Key number 1 is understanding how to exist in this duality, okay? Learning to exist in duality. Now, what do I mean by this? Remember, I talked about this world of duality when I talked about yin and yang, positive, negative, male, female. Whenever a viewpoint is pushed on you, how do you react to it? Do you immediately view something as good or bad? Or do you say, hey, I don't know. This is someone else's opinion, doesn't necessarily mean it's true or false. Okay? A lot of people right now, they're in a lot of pain because of everything that's going around them and everything they're seeing on the news, everything they're seeing in social media. They're always in a state of fear, of holding on to something that they feel they're going to lose. And when we hold on to things, that's when we lose them, right? So learn to be more open, receptive, and neutral. Immediately, when you get to that state, you're already getting to the level of 350, which is acceptance, right? When we get to the level of acceptance, we're no longer fighting. That weight has been lifted. And don't worry, I'm going to share with you by the end of this video the letting go method to completely transcend from all of those lower levels, because that's, I think, the most important thing of all. Number 2, this is going to be cool for you. Find your personal triggers. Just notice your personal triggers, because in all of our triggers, within all of our triggers, the very fact that we get triggered means that there's something to work on. What is triggering you? Is it when someone uses the N-word? Is it someone who curses? Or is it someone who says something that you don't like? What is triggering you? Why? Why does someone else have the power to say something that makes you feel like shit? How can you give someone else the power to make you feel this way? If you are a powerful, conscious, sentient being, then you should be in control of your destiny. If you are to be in control of your destiny, how can you let what someone else said affect you, right? Every single thing that triggers us is something that's trying to wake us. That's something that's trying to let us know that this is what you need to use. This is what you need to let go of in order to move on up to that higher level of consciousness, that higher level of vibration. Okay? So every single trigger that we have, I'm always observant on everything that triggers me. When you notice things that trigger you and you accept it instead of fighting it, instead of pushing back on the thing that triggered you, you allow it to be, you let it be, which is, we're getting to the letting go method already, then that dense energy that you were holding on to, it feels like a weight has been lifted. Which leads me to method number 3, the letting go method. In essence, the letting go method, by the way, if you want to learn about the letting go method in more detail, I recommend reading this book, Letting Go. It's by David R. Hawkins. Letting go doesn't mean you're just bending over backwards. It's quite the contrary. Letting go is learning to let things be and fully accept and embrace them. Please look around you right now. Everyone's so guarded. Everyone's holding on to something. Everyone's trying to protect themselves from something. People learn about the law of attraction and raising consciousness, all of this work, and they think, oh, I gotta get away from toxic people. So what they do is they try to shield themselves every day. I gotta get away from toxic things. I can't eat the wrong foods. They're living in a constant state of fear, which is causing them more stress. What's interesting is I was looking at the life of Warren Buffett. He drinks 6 Diet Cokes a day and eats a McDonald's every day. How old is he? 90 something? It's the very fact that he's not suppressing anything or holding on to anything. He's living just as an open book. And all of those things are relieving his stress. Stress is the ultimate killer. More than red meat, more than Diet Cokes, stress will kill you faster. So this is where the letting go method comes in. Whenever you have these triggers that are coming up, you allow them to exist. You give them permission to exist. That's the first step. The second step is giving it a mental embrace. You almost welcome it and you ask for more of it. And the final step is you just keep on doing it without judgment. Because sometimes when people do it, they're like, oh, I just did the letting go exercise. Why didn't it go away? Why does it keep coming up? Let it come up as many times as it needs to. And what will happen is a year later, you'll have completely forgotten about it. And only when you look back will you notice that, oh, hold on. I used to feel this way before, but I don't anymore. Because when it completely disappears from your conscious view, you're no longer feeling it or experiencing it every day. You have no recollection of it. It's gone. It's completely erased from memory until something, brings it up again and reminds you of it again. The cool thing with letting go is it works especially well with desires. When we have a desire, we believe that if we hold on to it, we're going to get it. That's not true. We don't get what we desire. We get what we choose in our lives. We've made a choice to experience a certain thing, therefore we get it. So when you learn to let go of your desire, what desire is actually doing, by the way, if you look at the level of desire, it's at the level of 125, which is forcing. The associated emotional state is craving, and the view of life is disappointing. When we're at the state of desire, we're in a low vibration state. Desires are not the problem. It's when we give so much meaning to this desire that it runs our lives. Okay? So, when you have a desire and you let go of the energy of desire, the very thing that you desire comes into being. There's a great example that David R. Hawkins gives in the book about a person wanting to manifest an apartment in New York City, and how when they have this desire, they write it down and they get to a state of being okay with not having it, right? Which is letting go. When you know you've let go when you don't care if you have it or not. When it no longer matters if you have it or not. Life goes on either way. Life is great, perfect, either way. And so this person performed the letting go method. And a couple of days later, they get a call that an apartment is available. They drive to Manhattan, and all of a sudden, it was supposed to be rush hour. All of a sudden, for some odd reason at that time, during that day, no rush hour traffic. They get to Manhattan from Long Island very quickly, and that apartment is available, and it's also at rent control, a very affordable price, right? So all of these things, I've had a lot of these things happen in my life when I've just completely let go of it. In the last video, I talked about one of my clients who had the desire to manifest a partner. And when he went to this landmark course, they made him let go of the desire, the meaning, the importance that he attached to it by performing a similar method, learning to let go of that underlying holding on to that feeling of wanting a partner. Does life go on if you didn't have a partner? Yes, it does. Does life go on if you never had kids? Yes, it does. I view my uncle or my cousin's children as my own children. As soon as he did that, 3 months later, he met the partner of his dreams. And they have 2 beautiful children together now. So this is the power of you learning to rise up with the levels of consciousness. Any desire that you have will easily come into being if you just stop holding on to it. Okay? What I want you to do right now is click on this video where I go into detail on how to control your mind to manifest your reality. Okay? And then I also talk about the letting go method, and I go into much more depth. So please check this video out, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in this one right now. Thanks.